It's time for the second screencast in AP Environmental Science for 3-1. In this screencast, we're going to look at specific biomes on Earth. Climate effects combine to create a predictable pattern of weather across the globe. These set weather patterns determines the types of vegetation that could grow in the area, which in turn plays a role in determining what types of animals can live in the area. These large areas with similar weather, soil, plants, and animals are called biomes. Biomes are not completely rigid. They can change within a small area over short periods of time due to changes in the climate. Another way biomes differ within a small area is by changes in elevation. There's a general rule about biomes that says if you increase your elevation by 1,000 feet, it has the same effect as moving yourself 300 miles to the north. Temperatures, on average, are lower at higher elevations, just as they are more northern latitudes. Some of the highest mountains in the southern Appalachians are 6,000 feet elevation, about 3,000 feet higher than the surrounding mountains. The types of plants and animals found there are much closer to the types found in Canada, simply due to the colder temperatures at that elevation. In that way, the mountain is like an island of biodiversity because those species are unique in the area, and for all practical purposes, they are on an island because they can't survive if they leave the mountain. Distribution of non-mineral terrestrial natural resources such as water and trees for lumber varies because of some combination of climate, geography, latitude and altitude, nutrient availability, and soil. So each country's availability of resources is based in some part to its location and altitude. You might need to pause the video to see all of the details in this picture. It's a really good one that shows how the amount of precipitation and the average temperature determines what biome was found where on Earth. Precipitation is easy. Larger plants require more water to grow, so it clearly limits growth if water is unavailable. It's important to note that it's not just the total amount of precipitation, but the distribution of it throughout the year. Two areas could receive the same amount of rainfall in a year, but one could receive it equally over the year, while the other has a rainy season and a dry season. The difference in the pattern of rainfall creates a difference in the biome, because not all plants can survive 4 or 5 months with no rainfall. Temperature is the other limiting factor on biomes. As the average temperature decreases, plants simply grow slower, so larger plants are found in hotter climates with enough rain, while smaller or slower growing plants are found in colder biomes. The interplay between both of these limiting factors results in all of the biomes we have on Earth. Go over all of the terrestrial biomes we need to focus on in AP Environmental, starting with the easiest, tropical deserts. Have very little rainfall. They're typically located around 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south latitude. Air that is heated by the sun around the equator rose up, and the water in the air condensed as the air rose and cooled. The condensation formed precipitation, which fell back to Earth around the equator, resulting in enough precipitation to support the tropical rainforest. The dry air now descends north and south of the equator and tends to fall back to Earth around 30 degrees north and south latitude. That means that this type of desert has almost no rainfall at all. So it has very little vegetation and very little animal life. This is the type of desert that might have an occasional oasis or area where groundwater seeping above the surface can support a small amount of plant and animal life. Looking at the climate graph of the tropical desert, the average temperature is high and the amount of rainfall is extremely low. The temperate desert is found in areas a bit further from the equator. This is a temperate desert in the United States. As a hint, tropical means that there is little seasonal variation in temperature over the year. Temperate means that there is more of a difference in temperature from winter to summer. Climate graph. It's easy to see that the temperature desert and warm in the summer and cold in the winters. The climate graphs for deserts hide something here because the average temperature in the summer shows as above 21 degrees Celsius. That's above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of the lack of moisture in the ground and vegetation, deserts heat up dramatically during the day but cool off rapidly at night. In Thomasville, if we had 24 hours of 7 degrees Fahrenheit, that would be okay with me. But the desert can have an average temperature of 70 degrees in the summer simply because the daytime temperature is 110, but the nighttime temperature is 30. Averages don't tell you everything. The range is just as important. So, besides the temperature being a bit more seasonal, temperate deserts also have a bit more rainfall than tropical deserts. It's definitely concentrated into the winter months, and that plays a big role in determining what types of plants and animals can survive there. as they must be able to survive 9 or 10 months with little to no rainfall. Cold deserts are last on this list. Precipitation is very low, and the average temperature gets much colder than the other types of desert. Looking at this climate graph, it's easy to see the lower winter temperatures. Remember, these are averages. So the average winter temperature of negative 14 degrees Celsius in January has a wider range to it. Only certain kinds of plants can survive much lower temperatures. Also, the bulk of the precipitation occurs in the warmer summer, which means this type of biome is different from the temperate desert, where the winter is somewhat warmer and wetter. Let me point out at this time that for apes, you don't need to know the exact average temperature and the exact average monthly rainfall for each biome. However, focusing on the big picture of how the temperature and precipitation is different for each biome is important. So, don't stress out about the small details. Focus on the big picture. Going back to the main biome diagram, we've been up the right side through the deserts. If we move to the left, the temperate pattern will repeat as we move up. But the difference this time is that each biome will have slightly more precipitation. That means we're leaving the deserts and moving to the grasslands. There's not enough water for large plants, but grasses are able to grow. The first one is tropical savanna. This biome is usually located between the tropical desert and the tropical rainforest. Most of the precipitation from the rising air over the equator fell on the rainforest, but these areas at the edges of the rainforest get what's left before the air descends over the desert. That means there is enough rainfall to support the growth of grasses and some small trees. The trees will never completely cover the land here as a forest simply because the precipitation is so irregular that natural wildfires spread regularly, killing most small trees before they become established. Also, while there is more rainfall here on average, it's very normal to go through years of drought, which kills most of the trees without deep root systems. Here's the climate graph. Remember, you can see that this is a tropical biome because of the lack of change in the seasonal temperatures. There's more rainfall than the desert biomes, but notice the pattern. Wet winter, really dry summer. Most trees need a more even distribution of water in order to grow. Moving north, we come to the temperate grassland, also called the prairie. This biome makes up much of the Great Plains states in the U.S. There's a similar amount of rainfall as the tropical grassland, but temperate means that there's a colder winter with a hotter summer. Most of the rain falls during the warm summer, which means this biome is incredibly productive during those months. For that reason, most of the corn, wheat, and other grain produced in this country come from these areas. The colder winter temperatures limit the growth of larger plants. Moving a bit more north again, the last grassland biome is the tundra. Precipitation is limited again, partly due to the natural pattern of air circulation, and partly because much of the precipitation falls as snow and isn't immediately available for use by plants. The melting snow and ice from the winter forms large lakes that don't have anywhere to go, and they don't soak into the ground because of the permanently frozen soil, permafrost, that's a few feet below the surface. Combine the availability of water with the nearly 24-hour daylight and relatively warm temperatures during the summer months, and you have one of the most productive biomes on Earth, if only for a few months. The ponds fill with mosquito larvae, and the small mosses that can survive under the winter snow start to grow rapidly. Caribou migrate here for the summer to eat the mosses, and waterfowl migrate in to feast on the mosquito larvae and other aquatic life. You've got readily available water, plenty of food, and much longer day lengths to find the food. Feed it to your young and have them grow rapidly. As the summer season ends, though, the climate graph reveals that the winters are very cold. So most of those species that migrated in for the summer migrate south for the winter. A special kind of grassland is the alpine tundra. Alpine means it's associated with higher elevations. Tundra is typically associated with higher latitudes, but you can still get this special kind of higher elevation tundras because the lower temperatures there create the same sort of environment. If the wintertime, nighttime temperatures get too low, larger plants simply cannot grow, so you end up with tundra just the same. There are small pockets of alpine tundra in the southern Appalachian Mountains, but only at the very highest elevations. Moving back to the main biome diagram, we're moving left and up again, adding a bit more rainfall. We're into the temperate shrubland, or chaparral. There's more rainfall, enough to support the growth of bigger plants. Temperatures are warm enough to support the growth of larger plants, and the reason we only have shrubs growing here is the seasonality of the rain. The summer is hot and dry, which means that this biome is very susceptible to natural wildfires, which many of these shrubs promote to help prevent any competition. Plants may grow well for a few years, only to be wiped out by fire and start over again. It's great for shrubs, which can start over every few years. For the larger plants that take longer to complete a life cycle, just like the mighty python skid, these are dark days indeed. Moving back to the main diagram again, we've got one pass left. The leftmost side covers areas with the highest amount of precipitation. The first one is the tropical rainforest. Tropical because of the lack of seasonal changes in temperature. Rainforest because it does rain nearly every day. If you remember the dry air that caused the lack of rainfall in the desert, this is where the rain fell. Tropical rainforests are located near the equator, and because they are warm year-round, most plants here are broadleaf evergreen. Most of the evergreens we have in our area are needle-leaf evergreen, or pine trees. These plants can do photosynthesis year-round and don't need to protect themselves against water loss or cold temperatures. Pines are great at this. So they retain their leaves year-round, but they're broadleaf evergreens. Here's the climate graph. There is a rainy and drier season to the precipitation, but compared to other climate graphs, it's easy to see that there's a lot of water. The biome has incredibly high productivity because of the high temperatures and rainfall, but it suffers from lack of nutrient availability. Decomposers release nutrients from dead organisms, but the high amount of rainfall means that most of those nutrients will be lost to runoff if they aren't rapidly absorbed into new plants and, in turn, animals. For this reason, clearing the rainforest for agricultural land makes it for incredibly productive farmland and grazing pasture, but only for a few years before the soil is ruined. Moving a bit north, we come to the temperate deciduous forest. I think you know what temperate means, but deciduous means the most of the trees lose their leaves in the winter. It's an adaptation to survive the cold winters. Photosynthesis slows dramatically at lower temperatures, and the cold temperatures in this biome would damage the broad leaves. So plants simply lose them and grow new leaves in the spring. There are evergreens in this biome too. This biome is where we live in South Georgia, and we have plenty of pines along with deciduous trees. Rainfall is more evenly distributed across the year in this biome. Next up is the taiga. This biome is dominated by needle-leaf evergreens, as they're the only types of plants that can grow in the colder temperatures. They also are the only kinds of trees that can support the crushing weight of snow on their branches during the winter. This actually helps insulate them against the extreme cold. This biome is also known as the boreal forest. Unfortunately, this biome has several different names, as I mentioned a second ago. The northern evergreen coniferous forest, the boreal forest, or just call it the taiga. I have to apologize for science having so many names for things. It's part of science to name things so that we can then talk about them intelligently. But this biome suffers from having so many different names, it gets confusing. The last biome is the temperate rainforest. If you remember back to the rain shadow effect, wet air moving up over a mountain range cools and drops most of its moisture as rain. On the back side of the mountain, you get a desert, but on the front side, the increased amount of rain supports the growth of large plants, such as these redwoods. It's a rainforest, but the wind patterns that create these are found outside of the tropics, so it's a temperate rainforest, or coastal coniferous forest. Last, it's important to point out that mountains play several important ecological roles. The snow and ice on the top of this mountain reflects much of the incoming solar radiation back out as light, not infrared, which reduces the global temperature. Melting snow and ice in the summer supplies lower elevation areas with fresh water. Also, because of the elevation latitude effect, Mountains represent little pockets of biodiversity where species not normally found in that latitude can survive. A 15,000-foot mountain may only cover a few square miles of land, but vertically, it can host a wide range of biomes and species. Remember that plants in a biome have adapted to thrive in the climate of that biome. The animals have adapted to live in that climate and eat the available plants and other animals of that particular biome. Thus, the climate determines the plants, and the plants determine the types of animals. Think of your time in APES as a long climb. In May, you'll be sitting on the top of this mountain of knowledge, and you'll have mastered all of the material along the way. You're probably going to slip somewhere along the hike, but hang in there. It's worth the climb. For now, that's it for this screencast. Thanks for watching.